Hey, what is up guys, I'm KBHD here, and there's been a lot of hype about a certain phone over the past couple weeks. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called the Pocophone F1, and it's everywhere. This all started in India, and it's been moving to other regions slowly, to Europe, and then to North America. So you might be wondering, why is this thing getting so much hype? Honestly, it's simple. The phone has a few key things. It has a Snapdragon 845 chip, it has 6 gigs of RAM, and it's packing a 4,000 milliamp hour battery, and it all costs $300. That is why people are interested in this new Pocophone F1. And that is, of course, by design. Like, they know that if they can hit those few things and package it all well and hit that price point, that they could possibly have a success on their hands. So everything is built around that. And if you look back not too long ago, that is exactly what OnePlus did when they were getting started. They basically crammed as many high-end, high-profile specs as possible into as low of a price as they could achieve, and they got a lot of attention for their flagship killer. Now, of course, this phone's bumped up in price a little bit, so it's around $500. So with the arrival of the Pocophone, people are starting to look at this $300 phone as the flagship killer. And then sprinkle a couple of sponsored videos in there, a good enough marketing campaign, and you got yourself a potential winner here. But is it? Is this Pocophone a winner? Should you buy this phone? Okay, so honestly, at the base level, this phone takes the strategy of copying a lot of the best things from other phones and does it well. Now, a lot of people, including me, have given higher end flagship phones some flack for the copying that goes on at that level, but at this price, copy whatever you want. Bring as many high-end, expensive seeming features down from that high-end into this price point as you want, because now that's an advantage. So I'm fine with that. So that's exactly what they did, and they cut a couple corners where they can. So looking at this screen of the Pocophone, it's a perfect example of this. It's a 6.2-inch LCD display, 2246 by 1080, and for a $300 phone, it's pretty impressive. Of course, it resembles the display of a much higher-end phone like the $1,000 iPhone 10, or I'm going to compare it to the $500 OnePlus 6 because, let's be real, that's what everyone's comparing it to right now. And while I think they could have just gone with an even top and bottom bezel here and been fine, they went with a notch because at some point people just associate the notch now with a premium look. There's still a chin though, and when you look more closely, the bezels all the way around they're thicker and they don't coat over those sensors up in the top notch to hide them the way the iPhone does so well. And just generally the curved corners here are a bit much for me. Like that is a lot of curve that feels like you're starting to lose real screen space. And it's even more obvious up top with the notifications and the time and things like that. So again, it resembles some high end, like we said, but it literally cuts some corners. The thing is, a lot of that stuff just kind of fades away into the background when you're actually using the phone. So it's a good corner to cut when you're just looking at the screen anyway. And that theme continues throughout this whole phone. A lot of things resemble the high end. They look really high end, but when you look closely, you can kind of see where they start to fall off a little bit. But a lot of those trade-offs at this price point are fine. The build quality, for example, it's 8.8 millimeters thick, but it doesn't feel like one of the thicker phones since it's tapered. The buttons are well placed and they're clicky, and the back is polycarbonate, which is basically another word for hardened plastic. And it's like a slight matte finish, a sort of a satin, just enough to not actually get that many fingerprints. And it comes with a clear case in the box if you're into that, but basically this is one of those phones that I actually don't think you'd need a case or a skin for. And also I mentioned the sponsored videos earlier because as much as people love that headline that this is a $300 phone, they're also looking at a version of a sort of a Kevlar / graphite looking material. That version of this phone is not $300, but it is pretty nice. You get chamfered edges all the way around. The fingerprint reader is in the correct place. The speaker grill for the stereo speakers and USB-C are at the bottom. And up top, there's this old school port you might not recognize. It's called a headphone jack for plugging in those old school headphones with what's called a wire, if you're into that. Very cool. And on the side, there's a micro SD card slot. Basically not a whole lot of hardware trade-offs, to be honest. Now, obviously, most flagships coming out in the last year have had that glass back. Not even really because of looks, but it does feel more premium and more dense. But polycarbonate, this is perfect for the price. There's no wireless charging in this phone, and also no need to go with expensive, fragile glass when a signal passes perfectly through plastic anyway, and it's way more durable. And then the specs. Of course, that's what got us here in the first place, and this is actually where that little "by Xiaomi" at the back of the phone comes into play. Technically, Pocophone can be looked at as a new brand, but it's part of Xiaomi, and that's how they can afford to get these parts that they put in other Xiaomi phones. The infrastructure is already there to even subsidize it a little bit. Snapdragon 845, 6 gigs of RAM, It's liquid cooled. It's about as liquid cooled as any other 2018 smartphone though. I wouldn't say this is a huge standout feature. And performance is all good. This is running the latest version of Xiaomi's skin, MIUI 10. That's just how I say it. And I've actually found it not bad. If I'm honest, I really didn't like that many other previous versions of MIUI, but this one is making a lot more choices that I like. The theme is clean. They give you an app drawer by default, and there's plenty of little useful features that I found thoughtful and well placed instead of just cramming things in, you know? Like, this is the first time I can say I could probably see myself using a Xiaomi phone every day, and that's saying a lot. And there's also some quite unique things. I like the subtle little blur when you bring the notification shade down. The placement of the brightness slider, one swipe away instead of two, is nice. The battery info being one click away every time you plug it in. It's good. I like it. I'm excited. I still do prefer personally stock Android. That's where I'm at. But I think this version of the software, I'm excited to see in other Xiaomi phones as well. It even has Face Unlock. This might be the second most impressive part of this budget phone. Then there's also the 4,000 milliamp hour battery. It has proved to be great, easily a full day phone. Not a 2-day phone, but again, it's great. No wireless charging, like I said, but it also does have fast charging. And then the camera. The camera is usually where we see a pretty big drop off on budget phones. I would say this is still the case here, but on the surface, it's dual cameras, primary one being a 12 megapixel with an f1.9 aperture. It appears high end, but the cynic in me is like, no way, I'm not gonna fall for that. I'm fully ready for this $300 Xiaomi phone to have a trash camera. But it's not. You can't compare it to like the $700-800 flagships of the world, but it's more in line with like the Moto G6. It's okay. Now I do have to say I did find it annoying that it automatically watermarks your photos until you go into the settings and turn that off. Why would they think anyone would want that? I don't really know. Anyway, the main characteristic with the photos from this phone is they're all soft. That's the most common thing. But if you give it a lot of light, you can get decent results. The color science is pretty good. The color shifting is not bad at all. There's not a ton of dynamic range, but it gets the job done. It's not a problem camera at all. It obviously fits in great as a camera on a $300 phone. So overall, you can see a theme here with the Pocophone F1, and it's something you have to do well to make a good budget phone. You ride the line between copying the best and most expensive and most noticeable parts of other phones while cutting corners to save money in other less noticeable places. And this phone has struck a really good balance of that. If you go back to the beginning, they nailed the surface stuff. Everyone loves $300, Snapdragon 845, 6 gigs of RAM, 4,000 milliamp hour battery. That's what they built this phone around. And they're mimicking a lot of the looks of the premium phones as well. The notch, the big display, the overall build, the tapered shape, the dual cameras, and of course being red and black doesn't hurt at all for me. It even throws in fast charging, surprisingly impressive stereo speakers, a notification LED, a headphone jack. But the trade-offs are equally important decisions they make as well. So no NFC in this phone. That might be something you care about if you were going to use Android Pay. There's no IP rating, so technically not splash proof. It's the below average camera quality, but not a huge deal. It's an IPS display instead of OLED, a thicker bezel all the way around and a real chin, and a toss-up of whether you'll like Xiaomi's skin or not. Plus the weird quirk of lacking DRM to play back HD video in certain apps like Netflix or Amazon that can't be fixed with a software update, although it does still work full HD for YouTube, which I care about. So whether you buy this phone or not will depend on whether you can stand those trade-offs that they made or not. Like obviously I would like this phone more if it had, you know, stock Android or Oxygen OS or something like that, or if it had a much better camera. But this is a $300 Xiaomi phone we're talking about, so I think the combination of the specs, the build, and the software here make this, I think, my favorite Xiaomi phone to date. And honestly, probably a lock for budget phone of the year. With all the hype that came with this phone before I even got it in my hands, I was fully ready to get it and not be impressed at all with it, but I like it way more than I thought I would. Respect, worthy of the hype, worth a buy. Thanks for watching. Talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.